Hey everyone, Cleo here, welcome to my channel. Today I'll be rounding off my reading for the month of March. Now the month of March isn't over yet, it is the 31st of March at the moment, but I still have 200 pages to go in my next book, so I'm pretty sure I won't be able to finish it, so I'm rounding it off right now. Now in the month of March I ended up reading 4 books, which I'm quite happy with, especially since one of them is an 800 plus book. I was happy with this. I did not get to finish one of the books that I said on my TBR, but it'll happen in April, I'm sure of it. So the first book that I finished in the month of March is actually a book that I read on my Kindle, and that is The Embers of All Seasons by Emiko. Now in The Empress of All Seasons we are introduced into a world in which there are demons who are called yokai, and they are kind of enslaved by the humans in this world. They are forced to wear, for example, a metal collar and do so that they are registered, and this collar also contains their powers, so they cannot use it against the humans. Now every time that the future emperor is in need of a bride, he will host a competition in which the competitors are girls from around the world in which we are living, who have to conquer the seasonal rooms. So they have to conquer summer, winter, spring and fall, and they are introduced to multiple elements in those rooms that they need to conquer in order to become the empress of this world. Now the character to which we follow most of this story is Maddie. Maddie is actually a yokai, and yokai are not allowed to enter into the competition. However, she has been training all her life to enter nonetheless. Because she's also somewhat of an outcast in her own society, so she doesn't really belong with her people neither, and the one way she can redeem herself in the eyes of her people is by entering into this competition, winning and stealing the riches of the emperor. Now I really like the premise of this, and I was really in the mood for YA, but this is the second YA book I read this year, and it is also a disappointment for me. I like the premise of it. I also like it interspersed with certain legends or myths from this mythology existing in the story, which I really liked, but these were like very short fragments throughout the book, so in the whole it didn't take up too much of the book. What I really felt to be the main disappointment about this book was that the premise is it's supposed to be around this competition, but I felt like the competition part of the book really is just about like 1/3 of it, or it seems like there's not a lot of time spent in the seasonal rooms, and as a result, it also felt like there weren't really any challenges in the seasonal rooms at all. The seasonal rooms were not expanded upon more. I guess I was expecting it to be more of like a Hunger Games style of book, and to be more about the survival of these different rooms, but that turned out not to be the overall plot. So that for me was a bit of a disappointment. Then I went into my second read for the month of March, which is actually the book that I need to read for a book club with my friends, which has been postponed to April now, but fine, I've already read it. I'll try to remember it until then, and that is The Princess Bride by Goldman. Now I read this on my Kindle because I did not have a physical book, but a friend of mine ordered it, and due to it not getting delivered in time, she received the second one and I received that one from her. Now I will say it totally depends upon which edition you read, because the Kindle edition I read had a lot more material than this one does, and it's not positive, you know. I would say only read the original. So that means that if you have an edition that starts with like an introduction by the author and things like that, don't. Start from the moment in which it says The Princess Bride. If you have an edition that continues after the end of The Princess Bride to tell you about how the sequel to The Princess Bride was made and to give you a taste of the sequel, don't read that, please. Now as for The Princess Bride, I really enjoyed it. It really is like my type of humor. It's like a very quirky, weird humor that really suited me very well. It's not like the greatest story of all time or anything like that, but I really liked how it was interspersed between so the story is presented to us as being a story that was told to the author when he was a young boy and when he was sick, and that like completely changed his mind, his world. And so when so many years later he is a father himself and he wants to give his son this book, he goes through all possible efforts to get this book to his son, and his son doesn't like it. And then he discovers that his dad had actually not told him the entire book. His dad had kind of picked and chosen like the parts that were interesting for a whatever-year-old boy at that time, and he had just gone through like the good parts, and he wants to do the same for his boy and future children to read this book. So he's going through the book and editing it so that only the good parts remain. And so we are interspersed between like the story and then the author's notes on like this or that I have left out of the original story here for this or that reason. Which I find to be a very interesting element to the story. It gave it also another layer of humor, because like you know that there is no original Princess Bride. But so I really liked it. I thought it was quirky, fun. It had a little bit of like the fairy tale feeling to it, which I really liked. It's a very light, enjoyable book in that sense. Wouldn't necessarily say it's something that you have to read, but I think if you're looking for something light, fantastical, fairy tale-esque that can give you a giggle here and there, then this is the way to go. The third book that I read this month is my commute book. I had started a second commute book, but that didn't finish in time. But so the first book that I finished on the commute this month is Into the Wild by Jon Krakauer. Now, I had seen the movie already, so I knew what was going to happen. I knew the story, but I still enjoyed this very much. So Into the Wild is about a boy called Chris McCandless, who, I don't know, somewhere in the 80s or the 90s, I'm not sure anymore what time, he left out on a journey into the wilds of Alaska. Relatively unprepared. He wanted to get closer to nature, to live life at its most purest, and 5 months later or something like that, he was found dead in the Alaskan wilderness. Now, the movie and the book are very different in the sense that the movie is very much a like an enactment of Chris McCandless' life, or at least of his final life, and we really follow him as in a narrative sort of way. This is very much a non-fiction in which parts of his life are introduced to us, but like always fragmentary. So we are introduced to people who have met him along his road, along his way, people who have given him the lifts into Alaska, parts of his family and things like that. But we are never really shown what happens to him in Alaska, because we don't know what happened to him in Alaska. So there are conjectures made at certain points, that is the fact, but like in the movie it is presented as if this is the way it went, but obviously we don't know how it went. We have his notes and we can kind of reproduce what happened to him based off of that, but it is unclear, as still today it is unclear like what exactly went down there. Also how he actually died in the end. In the movie we are presented with one version, but in the book it turns out that that is a hypothesis, you know, it's not for sure that is the way he died. Now, I really liked it. I found it very difficult to rate just because it's very different from anything else that I have read, you know. It's very small scale. We really just follow Chris McCandless. We follow his life, his character as it is being interpreted by the people who meet him in his life, you know, people who have come across him give us their version of Chris McCandless, and it very much stays on the small scale throughout, which I actually really enjoyed, you know. There's no attempt at making assumptions about Chris's generation, or a type of vagabond type of character. Maybe that's the generalization that's like the most in there, because there are parallels being drawn with other characters who have done similar things as Chris McCandless has. But I really enjoyed it. I definitely don't think it's for everybody. It's very small scale. It's very much just about a life living and the impressions that life leaves behind on other people who have met this person along the way. But I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I know that Jon Krakauer has also written a book called Into the Air, and I might also want to read that. It's something about mountaineering. I really much like these types of books in which you are introduced to like a certain type of like travel adventure or things like that. I find them to be inspirational, though this one definitely doesn't want you to go out into the Alaskan wild without any preparation, but I still like having like a sort of like travel element to it in which you are given some info on a part of the world where you might not have been yet. Then the final culminating piece for my March wrap-up is a huge chunk of a book, and it is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. And it's fine to see it again in this beautiful edition, because for most of the month it has had its dust cover off, and then it's really just bland. It's just, in my edition, just this purely blue one. So don't know where I was going with that, but in any case. So The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon is all the hype at the moment. It came out the 26th of February or something like that, and it is a epic fantasy. It is a standalone, which is a nice deviation from the standards. You know, fantasy a lot of times is trilogies, series, or things like that, and you have to commit yourself to multiple chunks of books. This is still a behemoth at 800 plus pages, but it is a standalone, so you only need to get through these 800 pages to have finished it, which is, for some people is a plus. I know some people don't like that idea. They say like, yeah, but then, or why start a story if I'm only gonna get 800 pages of it, you know? If you're a big fantasy series fan, then you might find that this is a downside. That's also possible. And a lot of people are reading at the moment, a lot of people are raving about it as well. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I wouldn't give it a 5-star, I'm going to give it a 4-star rating, but it was really a magical ride. And I would say if you like reading fantasy and you're kind of looking for a fantasy that's not like the same rehash of the same story, then I would go with this one, because the world building is supreme. So we are introduced into this world with many different cultures, and the cultural differences that exist mainly arise from an event that happened 1,000 years ago, which is the defeat of the Nameless One, which is like giant evil dragon or worm, as it is called in this book, that roamed the realm at that time. Now there are different versions of the story of how this worm was defeated, and this has resulted into different cultures and different well, religions as well, but also it has affected the way that they look upon the world or the creatures in it. So we follow characters from different parts of the realm. So we follow a character who wants to become a dragon rider in the east, for example, a queen in the west who needs to produce an heir because, according to legend, as long as there's a queen descending from the original queen, then the Nameless One will not rise again. And then we have a sort of spy in her court coming from the south who is a protector of the realm, basically. She's been prepared all of her life to fight dragons, to fight worms. What I felt to be faulty about this one, and I should mention it here, is I felt that there were structural problems. I really liked in the beginning how there was like a very nice variation between west, east, and then after a while also the south. So we are constantly switching perspective, which gave a well-rounded story, and which gave a lot of time for every different character. But as of a certain point in the story, I feel like we're stuck in one perspective for too long. And so that's not necessarily the perspective of one person, it's just that at a certain point multiple characters come together in one part of the world, for example. And then I feel like the story stays with those characters for too long, and the characters that are in the other part of the world are just like neglected for like, I don't know, 50 pages, 70 pages or something like that, which gives the impression that they're doing nothing, which is also what is happening basically. They aren't really doing anything in the story, and that I feel is a flaw. Like, your characters should always be moving, even if they're not really progressing, for example. At least you could show what they are doing in the meantime, you know. To me, it just felt like we were neglecting those characters for the time being, and just having them wait around for the plot to reach them again. So as I said in the beginning, like, the world building is amazing, you get great representation. Also, there are some nice examples of female empowerment and female sisterhood that are very much presented in this book, which is a very nice change from a lot of more traditional fantasy from time to time. But so yeah, I would still definitely recommend it. It is, be aware that the beginning needs to set up a lot, so the beginning is very much more of a slow-paced start to it, but I definitely felt like I was very much into it at a certain point in the book. Towards the end, I have to say, it became a bit more of a struggle again, but I would still highly recommend this. So that's it for the books that I read in the month of March. I haven't done the calculus on it, but I think it is close to 2,000. I guess it would be like 1,800 or something like that, which is wonderful because I need to get to 1,200 a month. So I'm way above that. So I hope to see you guys next month. Please don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more of my content, or like this video if you liked my thoughts on the books that I've read so far. So see you guys later. Enjoy.